We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
Hello and welcome to the first Planet Holyrood of the new year. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record. I'm joined today by John Ferguson, who is now the editor of the Sunday Mail. Congratulations, John. And also Ben Borland, who's the editor of the Scottish Daily Express. So, no sleepy start to 2025. We kicked off the week with two speeches on the same day, one by the First Minister, John Swinney, and the other by the Scottish Labour leader, Anas Sarwar. Swinney's message was effectively to Labour saying, back the budget or else the whole of society will fall into disrepair and the NHS will become a complete basket case. Anas Sarwar just dodged the budget in its entirety, focused on holding the SNP to account, and then hours later caved in, as it were, if you want to call it like that, and said he would abstain on the budget when the vote takes place next month. So, starting with you, Ben, there's a long way to go to the Holyrood election, long way to go until the end of the year, but I think John Swinney will be happier with the first couple of weeks of the new year, or at least he'll be happier with his speech and how it was perceived compared to Anas.
I think so. I think that's right, Paul. I think he'll be happier with his speech and the way it's been reported, the way it's come across. I think he's just happier in general, given the wreckage of the SNP in spring last year. The position they're in now is nothing short of miraculous, really. The comeback that's happened. Now, is it down to John Swinney? He seems like a capable guy. He's sensible. He's not doing anything too foolish. But I don't think that's the main factor. I think he's really benefited from the UK Labour government's terrible start to their term of office, which, you know, they've become very, very unpopular. Some of their decisions and cuts have been some of the most unpopular in recent history, and the SNP have simply not made any mistakes for a few months, which is kind of unlike them, but perhaps that's John Swinney. As far as Anas Sarwar goes, I was kind of surprised in his speech, or perhaps in the questions afterwards. He admitted that he was almost praising the SNP. He said, I'm not going to stand here and say that all the decisions they've made over the past 18 years have been bad ones. In which case, what's the reason for voters to switch from the SNP to Labour? If he's almost defending their record.
No, I think what he's saying is that, you know, the SNP won election after election at Holyrood. So clearly they were popular amongst Scots. They haven't done everything wrong. You know, Scottish child payment, the extra childcare. I think that a lot of folk would say that Salmon's first term was pretty effective because that paved the way to a landslide. So rather than saying that it's all been terrible, I think he's conceding that punters think that some of it was good, but certainly the last few years, the wheels have come off the bus. They can't deliver anything. Public services are in a complete state of disrepair.
But surely political messages need to be clear, bold statements, black and white. The SNP are bad. We're going to change them. You know, we're going to change the narrative.
They've tried that though. They've tried that over successive Holyrood elections.
But that was then. This is
yeah.
Now
But they tried it in 11, got hammered. Tried it in 16, got hammered. Tried it in 2011. If you keep telling Scottish voters that the SNP are awful, they're terrible, it might make you feel good, but it's just not going to land because there's enough voters out there who think the SNP are doing a good job. You do need a more nuanced message, which is effectively, okay, they were pretty good or they did some good things in the early years, but they've just run out of road and their time is up and it's it's time for a new direction. And I take your point that you need quite clear-cut messaging, but if it's all one pace, it's never going to land with the voters that you need to woo in order to win an election.
I mean, I guess I'm maybe coming at it from a more conservative Express reader's point of view where I don't want to hear that the SNP have made some good decisions, and I'm sure.
With
our
respect,
readers
I don't
either.
think that he's appealing to you, though. I don't think he's speaking to you.
No, he's not, no.
I think he's speaking to the soft SNP
Yes.
voters who moved to Labour at the general election, who've now maybe moved back to the SNP in the last 6 months. I think he's trying to talk to them.
I mean, I think there's no doubt you need to give John Swinney a bit of credit for the fact that when he took over the SNP, they were regarded as a bit of a basket case. The problems were mounting up on all fronts, and he does seem to have managed to steady that ship and turn them into a party that has gone from one that I think most people thought was going to lose the next Holyrood election into one that's got a very good chance of winning it, and potentially he's going to have the opportunity to continue as First Minister beyond that. Now, the biggest factor in that resurgence has been, I think by any estimation, the trouble that Labour have found themselves in post-election, where the Scottish Party are having to live with these really difficult decisions that Keir Starmer's making in Westminster in terms of cuts in public spending, and then added to that, the huge amount of money that they have found to give Scotland in the budget. The SNP have now managed to use that against Labour by saying that they're going to reverse some of their most hated cuts, and Scottish Labour have now, I mean, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that Anas has been a bit outmanoeuvred here. He seems to have been forced to move from a position of just opposing the budget and saying, oh, well, we'll abstain unless they actually reverse some of our most hated policies quicker. So it's not an easy situation for Anas Sarwar to handle, but I think he's not handling it particularly well, and John Swinney is handling what has been quite a good set of cards to have been dealt better.
So look, the budget was smart politically from Swinney, put real pressure on Anas Sarwar, Scottish Labour, over the 2-child cap, winter fuel payments and the extra cash for the NHS. But if I got a criticism of the Scottish Labour position, which they've now arrived at, they should have done it a lot sooner. And what they should have done, in my view, is that within a week of the Swinney budget coming out, they should have said, look, all this extra cash for the NHS, public services, that's because of a Labour Chancellor's decision. She's ended austerity. It's only through those decisions that we're now getting an end of austerity in Scotland. If they'd said they were going to back it then or abstain at that point, I think it would have shut down that whole attack line for John Swinney. But I think Scottish Labour made the mistake in allowing it to drag on, even to the point at which his New Year's speech, they still hadn't made a decision, and then it looks like they were bounced into it by Swinney himself.
It's been handled by, from speaking to the Labour sources that I've spoken to, had told me that for weeks the line coming from the hierarchy of the party is that we don't want to go in there with a shopping list of expectations from the budget. We don't want to be in a situation where we're just demanding money spent this way or that way. But at the end of the day, what else can you do? Because the alternative is that you're just saying, well, we've given you all this money, but we're going to crash the government anyway. It doesn't really wash, and so it feels like in the end they've been bounced into coming up with a rather odd short shopping list of, oh well, fine, we'll not oppose your budget so long as you reverse our policies, which is, it's a difficult one to make sound good.
I mean, but he's already said they're going to abstain. There is absolutely no pressure on the SNP. The SNP don't need Labour to vote for their budget.
Yeah, exactly.
So, why would they give in to the demands now?
And to be honest,
they know it's passed.
And to be honest, it kind of feels like they've already cut some kind of deal with the Lib Dems that would get the budget through anyway.
It does. I mean, Russell Finlay often talks of the cosy left-wing socialist consensus, and it looks as though it's been proved in action. We're going to have the SNP budget with Labour abstaining, the Greens and the Lib Dems either voting in favour. So you've got this whole camp all just agreeing with each other.
But
and all the Tories
reflects Scottish opinion, though. I don't know if I've mentioned before, but obviously Russell Finlay, who backed Liz Truss for leader. I mean, Russell Finlay is clearly shifting his party to the right. he's desperately trying to stop the bleeding in terms of reform picking up support. He's going on things like asylum seekers, bus passes, cash to Malawi. Now he's talking about, attacking the benefits bill. I do think Russell Finlay is getting increasingly desperate because I think he sees the number of Tory MSPs is going to be halved at least next year.
I think he's right. There is they talk at Westminster and Whitehall about the blob, the civil service. It's the same at Holyrood, but they're the politicians. They all just agree with each other.
But surely you can see there's a much...
Remove independence and they all just agree.
If there's a cosy left-wing consensus between Scottish Labour and the Scottish Lib Dems, that I don't think that's going to... That pales in significance to the really quite frightening hard right consensus that seems to be building globally, where you've got Elon Musk and others absolutely determined to set the agenda in British politics. We'll tell you what you're going to talk about and we'll tell you what's going to happen as well. I think there's far more dangerous forces at work.
I mean, I think it's getting a long way from Holyrood, but politics across the West is shifting right. I'm not sure hard right is always, it's used a lot, the far right, the hard right, it's used a lot for people who perhaps aren't far right, as you might say. And if Russell Finlay takes the Scottish Conservatives slightly to the right, it's not. I mean, they were already probably to the left of the Democrats in the US anyway. And moving slightly to the right isn't...
Yeah, but where I take issue with it, he talks about the left-wing consensus, but, I mean, that reflects how people voted. I mean, the 2021 Holyrood election, I think 75% of people who did vote in the election voted for parties that are on the centre-left.
People vote for their parties. It doesn't mean that their votes are expressed by the MSPs in Edinburgh who have this very comfortable life and all sit around in the same bars and coffee shops and all agree with each other.
Tories are part of that.
Well, they are part of that, but at least they're trying to speak up for a different viewpoint rather than this one viewpoint of metropolitan Edinburgh.
The Tories always stand up for established power in society. That's what, to portray them as anti-establishment is ridiculous. They are the establishment. And I would point out that since 1999, if you look at all the parties that are currently in the Scottish Parliament, with the exception of Alba, they've all been in government apart from the Scottish Tories. That is down to the Scottish people. The Scottish people don't want the Conservatives in government. That is the consensus view. If that's a cosy left-wing consensus, then
not necessarily.
Then
The Greens and the Lib Dems have been in government because they were offered coalitions. The Tories have been the second. Is that the far right alarm?
So welcome back after a brief delay. I think it'd be fair to say it was a comedy of errors. We had the fire alarm go off. John Ferguson had to dash off for an interview, and obviously we're delighted to be joined by his body double, Dougie from the Scottish Daily Express. So it's
John will thank you for saying that.
Two right-wingers versus Mr. Impartiality. Let's go. What were you saying, Ben?
So yeah, before the alarm went off, the Reach internal right-wing alarm was triggered by me saying that Russell Finlay's spot on about the left-wing consensus, and I think I was making the point that the Conservatives have been the biggest party the second biggest party for a long time now at Holyrood. So it's not right to say that they don't represent a large body of public opinion.
Well, they do, but the minority. I mean, there is a consensus in the Parliament because that's how people vote. I mean, they voted that way since 1999.
But then, is it right to then say that consensus needs to change? Let's give people the option to change it and perhaps see what happens, because we've ended up with another budget that's going to pass without any real debate. There's no change. It's just what the SNP wanted, and one by one, the other left-wing parties have all toed the line.
So essentially, the budget debate is now it's over for this year because it's going to pass. There's going to be abstentions, maybe parties voting in favour of it. I mean, right now, we're in a situation where the SNP are on course for that historic fifth term, which, this time last year, if you said they were going to win the 2026 election, I think you would have guffawed. I'm just trying to think, what can Scottish Labour do to turn this around, if anything? Because right now it looks really dire for them.
Well, I think the problem, Paul, I've said this many times, is that Scottish Labour's year will depend on UK Labour's year at Westminster. In some ways, maybe it's been easier for Scottish Labour while UK Labour have been out of power, because now they're having not just to set out their own vision for Scotland, they're having to defend Sir Keir Starmer's vision for the UK, which is proven really, really unpopular in the first few months. Now, whether it stays like that, we know that he's wanting to kind of front load this bad news. Maybe it might change, but right now it looks like all Scottish Labour's momentum is stalled, and it's almost entirely because of events at Westminster, because you see it in the polling. It's not that the SNP vote is recovering. The SNP vote's just static. But Labour, I mean, people talk about the impact that reform's going to have on the Tories. I think reform's going to have as big an impact on Labour as things stand, because people are just completely detached from the kind of, you know, legacy parties, I suppose, to borrow a, you know, almost use a Musk phrase. But I think that's what, you know, ultimately in some ways it's out of Anas Sarwar's hand, and it's always been that way. You know, Labour, Scottish Labour and UK Labour for years have been putting themselves forward by what they're not. They're not the SNP, they're not the Tories. All of a sudden they've got to defend what they are, and right now people aren't really liking it.
Seems like a few things need to happen, as you say. UK government needs to become popular, start doing things that voters think are positive. I think Scottish Labour need a positive agenda of their own, because right now they seem to be a bit of a blank canvas. And they probably need public services not to improve in Scotland, because that is going to be, I think, their main focus. They're going to be talking about the SNP's lack of delivery.
Safe ground there.
Yeah, I mean that might be the banker, but I just don't think that's going to be enough to get them to power. I think they need Starmer to start delivering, and they need a positive, upbeat vision of the future that they can sell to the Scottish public, which right now they don't have.
Yeah, I mean, I think the wild card for 2025 is Trump in the US. I mean, we've already seen the impact that his kind of social media stormtrooper Elon Musk has had. Once the Donald gets back in the White House, all bets are off. I mean, look at his speech this week where he spoke about Panama and Greenland. And really, 2025 could be a very, very roller coaster year. Now, does that benefit Scottish Labour? Or does it actually benefit the SNP? Because if things are up in the air and uncertain, people just like sticking with what they know.
I just think it's a bit of a transatlantic sideshow. I mean, Trump's going to be all talk. I mean, the stuff he was saying yesterday about Greenland, I mean, it's nonsense. It's drivel.
Greenland today, the Shetlands tomorrow. I mean,
but you can say, you can say what he wants. There's a massive difference between what Trump says, what he tweets, and what he actually can deliver. And half of these things are not even going to get off the ground. So there's going to be a soap opera emanating from the White House. Is that going to impact on the Holyrood election next year or Scottish politics? I mean, I think we're going to publish a lot of articles with Donald Trump and Elon Musk in the headlines, but I don't think it's going to have any impact whatsoever.
But I think the reasons that Trump was elected and the reasons that Musk is popular with some people are the same reasons that Reform are polling well in Scotland. People have got this image of anti-establishment, which I know is pretty ironic given we're talking about the world's richest man and, you know, a really famous businessman who's been president before. But that's why Reform are kind of performing well in the polls, and that's what people want to give Labour, the Tories, the SNP a bloody nose. And while it might not impact directly on what's happening, although we've already had SNP figures expressing concern that Musk might try and interfere with the Scottish election, although I'm not sure tweeting about it is quite on deep state Russia or Iran levels. But I think it's premature to say that it won't have any impact because a lot of these issues aren't going away, and like it or not, people, a good portion of people get their news and form their opinions based on what they read on social media.
I suppose the thing as well is that it's actually, in political terms, it's quite a long way off still, May 2026. I mean, you think how much has happened in the last 15 months. What could happen in the next 15? It's still a long way off. I think there's still a lot, there's still... Anas Sarwar's biggest hope is probably that John Swinney makes a mess of things.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that Reform's rise suits the SNP electorally, because now what you have is a four-way split on the pro-UK vote on first past the post, and if Labour are to get into power, they need to win scores, or at least maybe a couple of dozen of first past the post constituency seats from the SNP. I don't see how that can happen when you have the Tories, Reform, the Lib Dems, Labour, all competing for pro-UK voters, unless somehow Anas Sarwar pivots and claws back the soft SNP voters that he won in the Rutherglen by-election and the general election last year. Just the arithmetic and the sort of Westminster mood music are looking increasingly poor for Scottish Labour.
It's also the default setting when independence is off the table. The SNP don't look like a pro-independence party because it's so far away from being a possibility at the moment that they just look like another centre-left party.
They do, and I was at John Swinney's speech at the Playfair Library on Monday, and I've said before, I'm old enough to remember his first leadership, which was a disaster, and the toll that took on him personally in the early bit of the century. But I think of him at the Playfair Library, he just looked relaxed, confident and happy. He looked like he was enjoying himself. He looked like a politician who's at the top of his game. Whereas I think Anas Sarwar is feeling under real pressure, probably feeling like his political destiny is not in his own hands, that he can maybe have some decent policies for Holyrood, but he's always going to be overshadowed by what happens down the road. So I'm not sure much is going to change over the course of this year. I think that the narrative might be set.
There is also, of course, a Operation Branchform shaped elephant in the room. If that were to come to a conclusion either way, that may yet have an impact on what happens, but it's been going that long. It wouldn't shock me.
See, the thing about Branchform is like two things. One is that I've noticed a bit of a shift in SNP messaging on Branchform, which is to say that if a crime was committed, it's the SNP that are the victims of that.
Okay, not the donors.
Yeah.
Well, indeed. So it's like, it was allegedly a fraud perpetrated on the SNP, allegedly. And also, it's a very risky strategy for Labour or any party to try and bake in charges after a police investigation. They can't be depending on that.
You're not depending on it, but we're told it's hit through on the doorstep. People brought Branchform up as a reason for their vote one way or another. And if it does come to a conclusion either way, it's obviously going to have an impact on the election. But no, I mean, Anas Sarwar and Russell Finlay would be insane to kind of base their entire year's campaigning on it.
Yeah, so let's go for predictions of 2025. Now, we've mentioned Elon Musk. Not a massive fan, I've got to be honest with you, but I look at the way that he has fallen out with Nigel Farage, which was pretty spectacular. I don't think anyone saw that coming. There was talk of him making £100 million donation to Reform UK. That seems to have gone up in smoke. But what I think it does show is how easily Elon Musk falls out with people. And I think my prediction would be, in a political sense, he's going to fall out with Trump pretty quickly, as he's done with Farage. And I think that his political stock will be pretty close to the seabed by the end of the year.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think Trump, the mood music appears to be that Trump's already getting a bit fed up of Musk stealing his thunder. President Musk, those insults from the Democrats seems to be hitting home. I think that would definitely hamper, hit Donald's ego. We were discussing it
We
earlier.
were,
Ben,
yeah.
the Chinese proverb is there's no room for two tigers on the mountaintop, and I think that may well be the case.
Donald Trump will not want to be overshadowed by some
No.
billionaire bampot.
No. And I think that also shows the standard of debate on the Express news desk. Chinese proverbs getting quoted.
Do you get that at the record, Paul? Do you and Chris McCall?
All the time. You'd be surprised what we discuss in the record. Ben, prediction?
So my prediction relates to Keir Starmer. I've been kind of wavering on this, in that there's been a lot of talk, and there was a poll in the papers at the weekend saying that Keir Starmer's not going to be Prime Minister. And I was a bit sort of dismissive, but I think on the one hand, Elon Musk and others don't understand how British politics works. There is no mechanism for removing this government. They have a huge majority. Clearly, Labour will still be in power. Now, I don't know, I'm starting to wonder, is Keir Starmer, does he really want this? Would he, if it keeps going this way, my prediction is that by the end of the year, Keir Starmer will be announcing some sort of orderly handover of power to his Labour successor.
No chance.
No, do you not think?
No.
I think he's in it for the full 5 years.
I do. I think that it's been a mixed start, to say the least. But I think that you'll have learned lessons from that. And I think that so much depends on the economy. I think that the revised forecast on economic growth will be worrying for him. But if they can start to turn around public services, get a bit of good news, change the tone, get a bit of Blair-style optimism.
Is he the man to do that? I mean, he's not Tony Blair. He's not even Gordon Brown.
No. I mean, it's no one's Tony Blair. There's only one Tony Blair. But
goodness.
I think that I'm expecting a better 2025 compared to the previous 6 months. I think he will still be in post this time next year, and I think he will lead Labour into the.
I mean, it couldn't be much worse. If 2025 is worse than the last 6 months of 2024, then I think Ben's right.
And obviously, Labour hang on, but and they don't have the track record that the Tories do of changing leaders all the time.
No, they don't have that culture.
But I still think maybe someone might have to have a quiet word and say, look where we were when you came in compared to where we are now.
Dougie, prediction?
Short of Donald Trump annexing Orkney, or at least making a claim, I think.
We've not been Western Isles given his.
Well, Western
mum's
Isles
heritage.
given his. Well, I
That's
think
right,
Ben
of
had
course.
mentioned Shetland. I'd mentioned the Western Isles. I decided to go for the last island group that's on his radar, no doubt. I think branchform will come to an end one way or the other, and we'll finally have that soap opera over with. Another small prediction I'm going to make. I think that Nicola Sturgeon might go an entire year without speaking in Holyrood while she concentrates on her book festival career. Although I see today she's been booked to play at the Glasgow Comedy Festival. I think people could write their own jokes about that.
Can I just say, Nicola, you're good for clicks, so I hope this prediction doesn't come true. Please speak at Holyrood, because your name in headlines is good when it comes to page views.
Did she speak at Hollywood? I mean, one of them was a mistake when she pressed the wrong button.
So you don't think she's going to be at Holyrood?
I don't think she's going to be at Holyrood much. I think she will appear on, she'll appear at the opening of an envelope. She'll do everything but the job she's been elected to do. And yeah, a lot of SNP folk will love her for it for some reason.
It'd be nice if 2025 was actually a good year. I mean, we've had some stinkers.
Pretty boring in here talking about good stuff going on now.
I think the last few years have been okay, haven't they? I mean, I've enjoyed
COVID.
Well, apart from COVID, the downfall of the SNP, I've enjoyed that tremendously.
Pretty fleeting, though. I mean, they're back, and now they're on course for a fifth term.
Are they back though? That's the thing. Are they back, or are their opponents just?
It's looking
because
pretty
the thing
good for
is,
them.
John Swinney could well win the election. But I still don't go. I still don't think he's going to come anywhere close to a majority, including the Green vote. And then who knows what happens then.
All right, I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you to Ben, to Dougie, to John when he was here. thanks to that fire alarm that completely tore the podcast in two. You can listen to this episode of Planet Holyrood on Spotify, Apple, or watch it on the Daily Record YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok as well. So thanks again.
We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.